Hello there, Drew Hanish with Whiskey Lore. Time for another whiskey tasting on the 4th of July, which is, well, it's a time to celebrate in the United States for the Day of Independence. And to celebrate, I'm going to share one of my favorite stories out of David McCullough's 1776 book and do a tasting of James E. Pepper's 1776 Straight Rye Whiskey. So first to the story, which I love this story. And if you get a chance to get the audiobook, David McCullough actually does the narration, which he's got a great voice for doing that and is a great storyteller. And actually is probably my favorite author because when you read his material and you look at the back of this book, you will see all of the notations of all of the references, page after page after page after page of research that he's done for these books. So you get a really strong feeling that you can trust what you're reading to not only be a great story, but also be factual, which to me is a big thing. I'm not much for the Hollywood angle of things because true stories actually can be really great all on their own, including this one, which is one that took place in March of 1776. And it was a situation where the American forces under George Washington had lost at Breed's Hill, which got known as the Battle of Bunker Hill. And the British had been inflicted with quite a few injuries and deaths during that battle. And so while it was a victory for the British because they took the hill, it was costly and showed that the Americans had a bit of a backbone. So the British were in, they had locked down Boston and Boston Harbor, and so there really wasn't much you could do, and this was the seat of the rebellion, so it's like, this is a place we really need. So this man named Rufus Putnam came up with this plan. Actually, let me go back just a little bit before that. The Americans had won a battle at Ticonderoga, New York, which is on Lake Champlain on the Canadian border. And after winning that battle, they had cannon there. And there was talk in Boston between the Americans of how could we go get those cannon and bring them back. And so Colonel Henry Knox was the one that said, here's the plan. He was sent up there, oxen, men, horses, anything that they could do to bring this 60-ton of cannon through a harsh winter to Boston. Now you get them to Boston, and this is where Putnam's plan comes into place. The Americans knew that a strategic location in Boston was Dorchester Heights. Slightly elevated, had a view of the harbor, had a view of Boston proper. And if you put cannons there, you were pretty much in control. And for some inexplicable reason, British General Howe, William Howe, just said, we'll get there sooner or later. Kind of took for granted, the fact that that location was available and they could go up there and really fortify their position. And Washington saw this also. So Washington said, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to follow this plan. We're going to build prefab fortifications, and we're going to haul up all 60 ton of these cannon overnight. So that's exactly what they did. And what Putnam suggested was that they fire off cannon and make a lot of racket somewhere else so that they could make noise going up Dorchester Heights without the British knowing that they were climbing the hill. So as the sun is coming up the next morning, William Howe steps to his window, looks out at Dorchester Heights, and sees all the cannon up there. And he was said to remark that the rebels had done more in one day or one night than I could get my army to do in a week, which was saying something. So the British didn't seem to want to win that war. There were a lot of opportunities where there were British generals who could have really stuck it to the American forces, but Howe was one of those that he had a lot of friends who were on the other side. So he was kind of gentle He didn't really get aggressive in terms of what he was doing to win the war. And so they ended up, of course, losing it ultimately. And so I have another funny story too that I'm going to share in just a moment, but I'm going to jump in and start doing this tasting of this 1776 James E. Pepper, which is one of my favorite bottles in my collection. Even when this thing is empty, it will still be hanging around because I just think it is the coolest looking bottle, because I love U.S. history, and this bottle is so cool in its design. Even has the 13 colony snake there on the back. And so this whiskey is, well, James E. Pepper is in Lexington, Kentucky, but the whiskey comes from Indiana. It is a straight rye whiskey. It is not bottled in bond, even though it is 100 proof. And the reason it's not bottled in bond is because this was aged under 4 years, as the bottle says it was aged for 3 years. Now, I don't know if their newer whiskeys are aging longer. Honestly, though, for me, the rye fan, I don't think it needs the cask for an inordinate amount of time to be a really good whiskey. So this is 95% rye, 5% malted barley. It's a recipe that gets used in a lot of different whiskeys because this is from MGP. And so this is basically James E. Pepper's spin on it. And on the nose, you get honey right off the bat. That rye is, there's a sweetness to the rye, but it's also very herbally, and it has a, I would say, like a dill kind of a smell to it. It's a definite very herbaceous kind of smell that you get out of it. There's some oak in there. So honestly, I don't know how much longer this really needs to be in the barrel because the oak is already influencing it. And a little bit of a pepper note that comes through on the nose as well. Before I dip in and do a tasting, I'm going to tell you my other story, which is a short story, but it was when I lived in Texas and I was working for a paint store, and my assistant manager was in, and we were both working on July 2nd, I think it was, or July 1st, whatever it was. It was a couple days before the 4th of July, and this woman was in, and she obviously had a British accent. And so my assistant manager says, "What are you doing to celebrate the 4th of July?" And she said, "We lost that war." I just, and honestly, I wasn't thinking that way either at the moment. It was an honest mistake, but it was just so funny because she was ready right then when he asked that question. Cheers. It's got a nice mouthfeel to it. Some citrus caramel comes in with the pepper. It's appropriately James E. Pepper because it's spicy and there's a pepper note. Now, it doesn't lead to what they call the Kentucky hug so much. There's a little bitterness that comes in on the finish and a little bit of a glue note. No, I've never eaten glue before, but for some reason you smell something and it gets on your palate as well. So I kind of pick up a little glue note there on the end as well. So I'm sure I could probably pin that down to being something else, something that is something you would consume, but please don't consume glue. Interesting whiskey though. I mean, this is one that I've had it at certain times and I thought it's too sweet, but it is peppery. It's very peppery, and it does have a nice nose to it. The caramel note and the honey, yes, they are fairly present, but they're not as aggressive as I remember. So either my bottle is starting to mellow a bit, or I'm just starting to work into this a little bit more. It's a nice nose. It is. Yeah, not bad at all. Very herbally. Yes. So there you go. You got two stories for one and a tasting. I mean, happy 4th of July is all I can say to you. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. And if you learned something or you have questions, you can also ask those down in the comment section. And make sure to subscribe for more videos in the future. And until next time, happy 4th of July, and cheers, and Slan Jubaha. It's good. It's good.